Good evening, my dear friends. I welcome you all to the Hindu and the Businessline editorial analysis on 10th June 2022. I remember having read a book called Sapiens. In the book Sapiens, the evolution of the humankind from the early stages to the present developmental stage is discussed. In one of the stages of development, three stages of development has been discussed. Three revolutions have been discussed. One such revolution was the knowledge revolution. Men who were wandering in the forest for food and did not know how to procure food and have the necessities being satisfied, the knowledge of fire, the knowledge of weapons gave them some kind of knowledge to overcome the difficulties in this present world. The knowledge gave them the skill to develop weapons. The knowledge gave them the knowledge to cook food. So, the Harari's Sapiens book is a very apt representation of the kind of endeavor we are ventured in, my dear friends. The knowledge revolution. The first editorial I am going to discuss is the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, Vinay Kumar Saxena, and the Chief Minister of Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal, are always in battle. The constitutional design of the Delhi administration is a very confusing one. Recently, the BJP government at the center passed a law on amending the National Capital Territory of Delhi Act, giving the definition of government impliedly to the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. That means that the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi will be the implied government in almost all the laws made by the Delhi Assembly. Recently, the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, Saxena, held a meeting of the Delhi Jal Board without consulting the Council of Ministers and the Chief Minister. This has started a row. The case with the the power of Delhi government is in the Supreme Court and being debated now. The article says that the division of the or conflict between the Lieutenant Governor and the Delhi government should not hinder the progress of the Delhi capital. The development of the Delhi capital should be at the center of agenda of both the Lieutenant Governor and the Delhi government elected by the people. The article says that a mutual recognition and respect must be there between the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi and the Delhi government. The center has three powers with regard to Delhi, that is public order, police and the land. Rest of the issues are being delegated to the Delhi government, that is the government elected by the people. So, in the development of Delhi, both the Lieutenant Governor and the Chief Minister has a role to play by mutual respect and recognition. Friends, the next article I am going to discuss is titled Ties Reset. This is with reference to Iranian Foreign Minister Abdullahian's recent visit to India. India had stopped supporting Iran because of the US sanctions. The India's taking part in the joint group having US UAE as its members also had upset Iran. India had stopped investing in Chabahar project. Chabahar is the port in Iran through which India used to export to Afghanistan before the Taliban took over Afghanistan. So India also stopped oil imports from Iran. because of US sanctions. The International Atomic Energy recent meeting of the Board of Governors were pressing sanctions on Iranian nuclear program. India is warning the US that we cannot stop Iranian imports of oil because the war at Russia, which is opposed by US, if India has to support this, the anti-war protests led by European Union and USA, Iranian oil imports should be allowed. So Iranian oil imports, if allowed, India will stand with USA and European Union for stopping oil imports from Russia. The cheaper oil imports from Russia is a huge draw for Indian imports. And while Iran is sanctioned and India stopped importing oil from Iran, we are left with no reserves or no stock of our own. It is not no, it is not that India should be impoverished of the facilities and resources which it needs. Therefore, let the visit of Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Abdullahian's visit be a happy portent for the future cooperation which we are going to engage with Iran. Because as you have observed that bilateral trade has decreased from $7 billion in 2017-18 to just $2 billion in 2020-21 due to the sanctions imposed by the US on Iran, and India had followed the sanctions. So the India is signaling there the bilateral ties are going to improve, and India is not going to mind USA on these sanctions. My dear friends, the next article I am going to discuss is an enduring agreement to bridging Indo-Pak ties. There are three western rivers which are being used by Pakistan. The waters are being used by Pakistan, and there are three eastern rivers which are being used by India. The three western rivers which are used by Pakistan are Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. The three eastern rivers used by India are Ravi, Bias, and Satluj. Pakistan is disputing the hydroelectric projects, Kishan Ganga project in Jhelum and the Ratla project in Chenab. And Pakistan has recently started disputing Palakdal and Lower Kalnai hydroelectric projects in Chenab River. Why Pakistan is opposing the hydroelectric projects of India on the Chenab River and the Jhelum River is not known. Because as per the Indus Water Treaty, which is discussed, the sharing of waters of 6 rivers between Pakistan and India, the western rivers being used by Pakistan and the eastern rivers being used by India, the hydroelectric projects are an exception. The exemption is provided for irrigation projects and hydroelectric projects. Then why does Pakistan is disputing the construction of hydroelectric projects in Chenab River and the Jhelum River are not known? Pakistan is asking for a court of arbitration to be set up on the decision of hydroelectric projects. India is asking for an neutral expert committee to be set up to look into the issue. Recently, the World Bank in 2022 has set up both the Court of Arbitration and the neutral expert body to look into the issues on the hydroelectric projects being constructed by India in Jhelum River and the Chanav. India has recently opposed the blockage of Fasilka drain into the Satluj by Pakistan. This is causing water contamination in the adjoining regions. There is something called Indus Permanent Indus Commission with commissioners from India and Pakistan as its members. Recently, they held a conference in New Delhi in May 2022 to discuss these issues. The article hopes that a cooperation mechanism will emerge out of which the fair sharing of the waters will be ensured, and also the question on hydroelectric projects in Jhelum and Chenab and the Fazal blockage into the Satluj will be solved through dialogue. The next article I am going to discuss is with regard to the Businessline editorial. The first editorial is titled Safety Nets. It discusses the establishment of an appellate authority by the central government by way of rules, information technology, intermediaries, and the social media ethics rules 2021. As per the rules, an appellate committee authority is being established to look into the social media content moderation by the private players like Facebook, Google, and Twitter. Recently, the Cambridge Analytica in the US was noticed. That was a manipulative practice of social media platform. Cambridge Analytica was taken seriously by the US, and it hauled up the Facebook, the Google, and the Twitter and discussed the issue with them. You know, the social media is a platform where the social, political, and economic issues of national interest and public importance are discussed. Often it has been seen that in the disguise of free speech, many hate mongers are just expressing their views on the Facebook and Twitter and Google. This kind of hate speech is in between the freedom of expression and the diligent exercise of the rights under the social media. Therefore, the appellate tribunal, the committee set up by the central government, is a right direction in this way. We cannot leave the content moderation to the private governance of Facebook, Google, and Twitter. Private governance means they will set up a grievance mechanism in the social media platform, and they will themselves decide on the content moderation. At the same time, the governance of the social media should not be left to even the government. Why? The government will have some kind of political interest in the social media. Hence, a balance of the freedom of speech and the interest of the government should be balanced in the social media platform. Therefore, the appellate committee should have experts from law, public policy, politics, the human rights activists, and the activists of free speech. The article is an eye opener that India is in the nascent stage of digital revolution, and unless we take our steps in a very prudent manner, this arena of a very powerful speech cannot be developed. Friends, the next article I am going to deal is India Incorporation's smart recovery may be short lived. Initially, in the initial few paragraphs of the article, it discusses how Indian companies, corporate India was in trouble even before the pandemic. And the pandemic came and destroyed the prospects of a growth and recovery. However, the corporate India bounced back. The sales increased by 35%, the profits in the profits increased by 65% over 80% increase in 2021. The interest rates, the interest cost declined by 4%, and the interest coverage ratio, which is the ability of the companies to pay the interest cost, just shoot up by 9 times. The sales increased because the demand was picked up and exports were very much comfortable in 2022. The net profits rose up 65% due to reducing the input costs by the companies and deleveraging the balance sheet. That is, companies chose to repay the debts, and thereby the interest cost was very much reduced, and the interest rates reduction, the stagnant interest rates for the past 2 years was responsible for interest cost which fell by 4%, and interest coverage ratio was higher by 9 times because the deleveraging the balance sheet and taking away the debt from the balance sheet of the companies helped it to just keep the interest cost at a very minimum level. However, having said all these things, there are some danger signals also coming. That is, the first one is the economic slowdown. The economic slowdown is because the Ukraine war is going on, and the US is heading for a recession. The margins have declined for many companies, like Asian Paints have lost 448 basis points in quarter 4 of financial year 2022. Similarly, Nestle has lost 310 basis points in quarter 4 of financial year 2022. The cement companies' net margins have declined by 300 to 400 basis points in the quarter 4 of financial year 2022. Then there is the runaway inflation. The inflation is hovering at a very high rate. In India, it is predicted that inflation will touch 6.7% levels, and the RBI's rate hike will create much more problems because the demand will come down and it will increase the borrowing costs of companies. Then the problem, the weakening of the rupee. The rupee has depreciated over 4% and is slated to touch 79 rupees per dollar in a few months from now. The weakening rupee has resulted from the exodus of foreign institutional investors' capital from India. The weakening of rupee has made the inevitable recession to look grim for India Incorporation. Then there is the rise in the interest cost of the external commercial borrowings. When the rupee has depreciated, the external commercial borrowings mean the Indian companies have a right to borrow from the foreign companies and foreign banks. These external commercial borrowings have declined sharply. In April 2022, it is just above 300 million. It had touched some $38 billion some few months back, but it has now come to just 300 million per month dollar per month in April. Then the stock market have crashed for more than 12% between October 2021 and the present times. All this show that though the recovery signs are good for Indian incorporation now, but these in what you call looming danger may affect the company's growth prospects in the coming. Friends, the next article I am going to discuss is the FMCG companies face the pressure of inflation. What does this mean? The FMCG companies are the companies, the fast moving consumer goods companies, which sell the consumer durables and the essential articles required by the rural India. That is, ITC is an FMCG company. The wheat packets, the rice packets, the packet food items, and the essential items packeted are all examples of FMCG products. The rural India has always been insulated from the COVID related pressures on FMCG. Even during COVID times, the FMCG companies have been able to make huge profits from the rural population. However, with the inflationary pressures are setting in, the future is somewhat moderated for the FMCG companies. That is, the demand is decreasing, and the rural India prefers to have a delayed demand of the kinds of articles they used to consume. This is lowering the margins of FMCG companies. They are reducing the quantity, that is milliliter or the gram per packet, so as to keep up with the unit cost. And the inflationary pressures cannot be just passed on to the consumers. Their way the demand will decrease. So the FMCG companies are just absorbing the heat of inflation. So the article says that a budgeting for the next 6 months is necessary, because this time too will pass. Nothing is permanent. This inflationary trend will also come down. When the inflationary pressures come down, the rise in the prices, which we are just looking at now, will not come down, and that will have huge profit for the FMCG sector. The article also discusses some people, some organizations, and some cartels. Cartels means the association of sellers selling a same product are reaping huge profits out of the Ukraine crisis and the crude oil increase in the crude oil price increase. That is oil cartelization by oil and petroleum exporting countries. They are just reaping huge profits and making huge money out of the present crisis. The article concludes by saying that these pressures will ease in the coming quarters, and there will come a time that all these difficulties will come down. Friends, I have come to the conclusion of the editorial analysis today. I hope you have gone through most of the points which I have discussed. Kindly read the papers in detail for more information on these topics. I will come tomorrow with some more topics. Dear friends, let me take bid adieu for today. Meet you tomorrow. Bye.